The last clear thought I remember from that night was this: if I stay inside my tent for another 10 seconds, something outside is going to decide for me. I didn't know what it was. I only knew the footsteps had stopped right beside my head, close enough that I could feel the nylon wall bend inward slightly, as if someone were leaning down to listen to my breathing. And that was the moment I finally reached for my flashlight. 3 days earlier, I would have laughed at how dramatic that sounds. I hike alone because I like the quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind you get in parks with joggers and barking dogs, but the deep Appalachian silence that makes your own footsteps sound intrusive. No podcasts, no music, just boots, breath, and the low creak of trees shifting in the wind. The first 2 days of the trip were perfect. Predictable weather, dry ground, no strange noises, no uneasy feelings. Just miles of trail and the kind of exhaustion that feels clean. Then, on the third day, I stepped off the path for a late lunch and found a campsite that shouldn't have existed. The clearing was too neat, flat, round, ringed by young trees like it had been measured. And right in the center stood a small gray tent, fully pitched, perfectly taut, not sagging in a single place. No backpack outside, no boots, no food bag hanging from a branch. I called out once, then again, louder. My voice didn't echo. It just died. I told myself the owner must have gone to the stream or taken a side trail. But even as I said it out loud, my eyes kept going back to the tent flap, closed so carefully it looked intentional. I circled the site. No footprints, no crushed grass, no cigarette butts, no trash. It was as if someone had placed the tent there and then erased themselves. That should have been my cue to leave. Instead, I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I tried to make it normal. "This is a great spot," I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. I pitched my own tent about 10 meters away, close enough to talk to the owner when they came back, far enough not to feel like I was intruding. I figured I'd wait a couple of hours. If no one showed, I'd move on in the morning and maybe mention it to a ranger. The plan sounded reasonable. That's what still bothers me about it. Evening came, then dusk, then full dark. I cooked dinner, sat by my small fire, and kept glancing at the empty tent across the clearing. The longer no one returned, the heavier the air felt. Not colder, not windier, just thicker, like the woods were holding something in. By the time I crawled into my sleeping bag, I was telling myself the owner had probably packed up and left the tent behind. People abandon cheap gear all the time. It happens. I don't remember falling asleep. What woke me wasn't a loud noise. It was the absence of one. The fire had burned down to nothing. No insects, no breeze, no distant animals. Just a soft, irregular sound outside my tent. Fabric brushing against fabric. Then a slow step. Another. They weren't heavy. They weren't fast. They were careful. I lay there, staring at the dark curve of the tent ceiling, counting my own breaths so I wouldn't make a sound. The steps moved around me once, then stopped near my head. Something pressed lightly against the side of my tent. My hand closed around my flashlight. And that's when I decided I couldn't stay inside anymore. The zipper sounded impossibly loud as I pulled it down inch by inch. I paused after every small movement, listening for any reaction from outside. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no retreating sound into the trees. I pushed my head out first, then my shoulders, gripping the flashlight so hard my knuckles ached. The beam cut a narrow white tunnel through the darkness. My campsite was empty. I turned slowly in a full circle. Trees. My backpack. The cold fire pit. The other tent across the clearing, exactly where it had been all day. perfectly still, perfectly ordinary. Whatever had pressed against my tent was gone. For a moment, relief almost made my knees weak. My brain rushed to fix everything. Raccoon, deer, half-asleep imagination. I even let out a shaky laugh. Then I realized something that made my stomach drop. There were no fresh footprints around my tent. The ground was soft enough to hold my own boot prints from earlier that evening. They were still there, clear and deep. But there was nothing else. No disturbed soil, no bent grass, no sign that anything had walked around me at all. The clearing looked untouched. My flashlight drifted toward the other tent. "I'm just checking if you're okay," I called out, hating how thin my voice sounded. "You scared the hell out of me, man." No answer. I crossed the clearing slowly, every step deliberate, like I might trigger something if I moved too fast. The tent didn't move. No shadow shifted behind the fabric. Up close, it looked even stranger than before. Not a wrinkle out of place, no dirt on the floor seam, no condensation on the walls. It looked like a display model. I reached out and lifted the flap. The smell hit me first. It wasn't rot. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't anything I could easily name. It was sharp and dry, like heated metal left out in cold air. It made my eyes sting and my throat tighten. I crouched and aimed the flashlight inside. The beam landed on the center of the tent floor. There was a black circle burned into the fabric, perfectly round, about the size of a dinner plate. The surrounding material wasn't melted. It wasn't torn. It was just darkened, as if something intensely hot had touched that exact spot for a fraction of a second and then vanished. I stared at it, trying to make my brain accept what my eyes were seeing. Then the light caught something else. A phone. It was lying on its back near the edge of the black mark, screen glowing faintly. I picked up the phone. The screen wasn't locked. A video app was open. The thumbnail showed a still image of this same tent from the outside. My mouth went dry. Every instinct told me to put it down and leave, to walk back to my tent, pack up at first light, and pretend I never found this place. But another part of me, the part that had stayed here in the first place, refused to back away. My thumb hovered over the play button. Then I tapped the screen, and the video began to play. At first, nothing happened. The video showed the tent exactly as it looked now, dimly lit by moonlight, the clearing barely visible beyond it. The image was perfectly still. No wind in the trees, no insects near the microphone, no movement at all. I held my breath without realizing it. 10 seconds passed, then 20. My thumb twitched toward the timeline, and I dragged it forward. The picture jumped. Still the same tent, same angle, same emptiness. I dragged it again, and that was when the frame stuttered just for a fraction of a second, like the video had tripped over itself. Something new stood at the far edge of the clearing. It took my brain a moment to understand what I was looking at. It was tall, too tall, thin in a way that didn't match a human body. The arms hung lower than they should have, nearly to where its knees would be. The head was narrow and slightly tilted, as if it were studying the tent. It hadn't walked into frame. It was simply there. My grip tightened on the phone. The figure didn't move at first. It just stood there, motionless, facing the tent. The longer I stared at it, the more wrong it felt. The proportions, the stillness, the way it seemed to absorb the darkness instead of reflecting light. Then it leaned forward slightly. Not a step, not a shift of weight, just a slow, unnatural bend at the waist, as if its spine worked differently than mine. My stomach knotted. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the light came. It wasn't a glow. It wasn't a flash. It was a violent eruption of white that exploded outward from inside the tent, so bright it erased everything else on the screen. The image turned into pure brightness. I flinched and almost dropped the phone. The video cut off mid-blast. My chest felt tight. My mouth tasted like metal. My hands were shaking as I exited the video and opened the gallery. There was another file beneath it. No preview image, just a black square. For a moment, I thought maybe it was corrupted. Maybe it was empty. Then a slow, horrible realization slid into place. In the video, the phone had been outside the tent, but I had found it inside, which meant someone had brought it back in after recording that first video, which meant someone had been alive long enough to start a second one. I looked down at the black circle burned into the tent floor. The perfect shape, the untouched fabric around it. Whatever happened here had happened fast, in one exact spot. My thumb hovered over the second video. Every part of me wanted to press it. Every part of me knew I shouldn't. I locked the phone and placed it back on the floor, right where I'd found it. Then I backed out of the tent. I stuffed everything into my pack without folding anything, without caring what broke or bent. Within minutes, I was back on the trail. I never told a ranger. I never told the police. I don't know what happened to the person who owned that tent. And I don't want to know what was on that second video. Some answers aren't worth surviving. If this story unsettled you, leave a like and let the shadows know. Subscribe for more tales you shouldn't hear after dark. And if you've seen something you can't explain, tell us in the comments. We're always listening.